Hey, welcome to KSL Plus, the digital-only news show where we dive deep into some of the biggest stories of the day. I'm Matt Rascone, and today we're looking at the timeout on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, if you missed the headlines this week, the FDA and CDC have called for a pause on the Johnson & Johnson shot. The reason? 6 women between 18 and 48 developed blood clots in the brain.
I think it's important to put this in perspective. This is an extremely rare complication.
That's 6 people out of nearly 7 million who have received the 1-dose vaccine in the US. The symptoms are similar to stroke symptoms. And for these women, they showed up 6 to 13 days after getting the shot. According to Johns Hopkins, these types of blood clots happen to 5 in every 1 million people each year. These types of clots are treatable, but are more difficult to treat than clots in the veins and legs or lungs. And the FDA, understandably, wants to know more. And here to talk about this and to go beyond the headlines is Dr. Kavish Chowdhury. He is the pharmacy director at the University of Utah Health, where he has been handling vaccine distribution. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Yeah, so Dr. Chowdhury, let's start with your reaction, if you wouldn't mind. As a medical professional, what did you think about the news that Johnson & Johnson, one of the 3 authorized vaccines in the U.S., would be put on hold?
It was a bit surprising, but it's to be expected as you have an EUA or emergency use authorization. Oftentimes you're just pushing to get something to the market to treat the masses. And the follow-up studies from the FDA or the follow-up data that's required, it may indicate that we need to pause. And this is really one of those cases where we're pausing. And I think the FDA, the CDC are acting appropriately and saying, let's pause for a moment here. Let's assess to see what truly is happening. Is there really a true safety concern? And our best bet is to just pause for the moment and see if it's really impacting a certain population or if it's truly going to impact the masses.
The news, I think it just from my own reporting the last couple of days, it sparked some concerns, as I'm sure you've heard, for reaching certain populations who benefit from a 1-dose vaccine, like the homeless and people who live in more remote areas.
Correct. Yeah, it has put a pause on some of the vaccine campaigns. We've been primarily at the University of Utah Health, a Pfizer site, so most of our patients have received 2 vaccines. But this does slightly impact our ability to roll out vaccine. But overall, for the U of U Health, the Johnson & Johnson has been a very small percentage of our overall vaccine rollout. But yes, to second-year concerns, there is a concern about the more rural populations or the homeless population or the hard-to-get-to populations or the hard-to-reach populations.
And it sounds like the production problems from last week may have actually been beneficial, not receiving as many as we expected.
Yeah, I was talking to my colleagues that I think for the first time in the history of my career, a massive supply chain disruption actually had a positive impact on patient care for the moment. So we're fortunate that at least it's less patients to reschedule at the moment and less patients that transition to an alternative product.
Certainly vaccine hesitancy is already an issue that we're seeing, and this isn't going to help. Yet we have to balance that with safety concerns.
There's also been concerns a lot, just across the country as we're talking about this, that this pause could impact just the public's trust in a vaccine to stop the spread of COVID. What are you hearing, and what would your message be on that front?
Yeah, and that is obviously a concern. I think as the vaccines all came up so quickly, again, to think about these vaccines came to the EUA or emergency use authorization in under a year, a lot of folks had concerns about that. My overall message is that please get vaccinated as quickly as possible. That's our only way of really getting back to normal, whatever the new normal may be. But I think with the vaccines, the pause for concern right now, it does heighten awareness that yes, we're still dealing with a new product. But overall, the products itself, the vaccines, the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and even for the most part, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, have been proven to be safe and efficacious. And really our recommendation is to get the vaccine as quickly as possible.
Can you help us understand the process here? I think just some more background info might help people understand, why this was put on pause. So what is the trial process for drugs and medications? And where in that process are we now with Johnson & Johnson? And, why would they make this decision, I guess?
So there's two different paths I'll talk about here. One is this overall drug trial process or vaccine trial process. There's 4 specific phases. And then with the COVID vaccine, there's actually the EUA process, an emergency use authorization process. And that's what we're in right now. The EUA process does take in consideration the 4 phases of drug trials or vaccine trials. It just expedites it. But overall, the first trial phase, it's just some of the preliminary testing you do for vaccines or drugs just to make sure that they are safe. The push is that you're just getting into human volunteers to make sure that it's safe. Generally, the vaccine trials itself or the trials itself are less than 100 people. And you're just trying to find out whether overall it's safe and you're not going to have any major severe reactions. The second phase is where you get to a little bit larger pool of people. So phase 2, looking at assessing side effects and just the overall how people are reacting to medication. But at this point in time, you're not assuming the medication itself is efficacious or actually working. You're just basically determining if it's continuing to be safe and what the side effect profile is. Then you get into phase 3, which is where you're trying to really dial in that dose for the medication or the vaccine to figure out truly what's going to be marketed to the mass public. So really, this is where looking at the EUA process we have for the COVID vaccine, what happened with this is that phase 1, 2, and 3 happened very quickly and all within less than a year, where typically this process takes multiple years. And then it got to market or to the emergency use authorization. But in a normal cycle, a product would go through phase 1, 2, and 3, and then go to the FDA for review and approval. Again, like I mentioned before, this will take about 6 to 8 years or multiple years for the most part to get the drug approved itself. And then you go into phase 4. Phase 4 is what they call the post-marketing analysis. And this is where I would say that with our vaccine trials right now, the COVID vaccine at the moment, this is where we are right now. Well, not truly there because we're not truly in that true phase of the trials, but we're probably in that phase right now where we are looking at the side effect profile and trying to dial in what patient populations the vaccine or medication should be targeted for. So typically in the phase 4 trials is where you start seeing maybe some different age parameters pop up or targeted populations of medication or vaccine should be used in.
Okay. And then what exactly with this pause is the FDA watching out for in safety monitoring, and how long does that part of the process last?
So in general, phase 4, so I'll just speak in more general terms here, it can go over for years. So think about Vioxx. It's a anti-inflammatory medication that came out years ago. It was studied for 5 years and then also pulled from the market because they found that it had some issues with folks with heart disease and heart attacks. So it could vary. So to answer your question, the time is variable. But what the FDA is looking for is based off the report. So there actually is a vaccine reporting system that we do report all our adverse events within. I think you saw with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, 6 patient reactions out of over 6 million doses. But these are all reported at the federal level to both the CDC and the FDA, and they're reviewed. So looking for, are there trends? Are there certain patient populations to be concerned about? Are there comorbidities? Are there medication contraindications we need to be concerned about going forward? So they're looking at all the data that may be out there that may help us predict who this vaccine or a potential amount of medication may be contraindicated in.
Okay. As a medical provider, how do you help providers and patients weigh the risks that are just inherent in every medical decision?
That's a great question. And let's say, talking about COVID, the risk of getting COVID is much worse than the risk of getting the vaccine. The vaccines, again, have been proven time and again for the general population to be safe and effective. And we would strongly encourage folks to get the vaccine as quickly as they possibly can. And the best vaccine is a vaccine that's closest to you. I understand it's a personal choice. And again, I would recommend, if you want to try to get back to normal as soon as possible, a vaccine does help that. We are in this for the long haul. So we are still going to have to continue to socially distance and wear masks. But the vaccine can kind of help us allow us to be closer to those we want to be around.
I think on the surface of this story, it's easy to see, at least for me, why a pause here might add to the hesitancy a lot of people have, the trust issues with the vaccine. But is there something to be said of the fact that the FDA is investigating and not trying to hide these side effects, however rare they might be, from the public?
Well, I think it's the FDA doing a great job because they want to be transparent about this. They recognize that with this vaccine and all medications they approve, it's all public scrutiny, and their own the public trust is in them to do their job. And I appreciate that they are taking this very seriously. I don't think it's an overreaction. I think it's an appropriate reaction to how they requested a pause. And it allows us to do time to kind of figure out exactly, is this really a bigger issue or is it just an issue for a targeted population?
Yeah. Obviously, COVID, I think with the pandemic, this was a unique situation. But does this, I don't know, is there something to the argument that we just did this too fast?
That's a great question. I don't think we did it too fast. I mean, working on clinical trials for quite some time, it was remarkable how fast we got everything done. But I think the reason why we got it done so fast is that all the focus and all the energy went to this. So, in essence, 3 years worth of work was done in a year because everything else was dropped to focus on it. So I still think the same amount of time and energy went into it. It just was all very, very focused and just got done in a shorter amount of time. So I don't think it takes away from the work that was done. There's still the same amount of work that went into any other vaccine that would go in over a normal course of time was done in this implementation or this approval. Yeah.
Now, even if this does make some people think twice about getting Johnson & Johnson, I think it's important to note that this is different. This is different from the other two authorized vaccines in the U.S., Pfizer, Moderna, and side effects, I guess, shouldn't be confused, with all of them.
Correct. Yeah. So the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine are considered to be mRNA vaccine, while the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca vaccine are very similar, that they are based off of the adenovirus. So again, they're there to stimulate different types of reactions in the body. But again, all four vaccines are there to try to protect the person from the overall virus.
Well, Dr. Chowdhury, is there anything else that you think would be important for people to know when it comes to this pause on Johnson & Johnson?
Well, there's a pause on Johnson & Johnson. There are still two other vaccines widely available across Utah. And I would strongly encourage those who have not received the vaccine to get the vaccine. There are appointments available at your local health department, a number of the healthcare providers in the state of Utah, so University of Utah Health, Intermountain Health, local health departments, and a number of pharmacies are all providing vaccine. Please call them, get your appointment scheduled, get the vaccine as soon as possible. The vaccines are free of charge. And again, it's the fastest way we can get back to being normal.
Okay. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
In Utah, more than 1.8 million doses of Pfizer and Moderna have been administered, compared to fewer than 80,000 people who have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The health department says there are around 50,000 unused doses of it left in the state, of course, currently on hold. Now, if you got the J&J shot in the last 3 weeks, the CDC says out of an abundance of caution, you want to look out for severe headache, abdominal pain, or leg pain. If you have those, you'll want to get checked out, they say. To stay on top of this and other stories, you can check out KSL TV, the KSL TV app, and KSLTV.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.